Hello, my name is Joshua Davis. I'm doing a presentation on orthopedic impairments for HPR 2120, Adaptive Physical Education. How I have the presentation constructed, we'll first define orthopedic impairments. I have some statistics involved with people with this type of disability. We'll go over some anomalies, disorders, and diseases that may cause orthopedic impairments. Halfway through, I'll give you a quiz to test your knowledge on the material, and afterwards we'll go over some exercises, some tasks that you can kind of implement to work with these individuals. We'll go over some of the assistive technologies, we'll go over a classification system, and at the end I'll give you a case study based on the material, and you'll leave your response in the discussion. And without further ado, here is the presentation. Okay, orthopedic impairments for adapted physical education. So we'll start first by defining orthopedic impairments. And usually what I do when I'm given a term is I'll break the term down in its basic components and then define them. So I have up here orthopedics defined and impairment defined, but how IDEA has orthopedic impairments defined is one that includes impairments caused by congenital anomalies. So congenital just meaning present at birth or very, very early on in childhood. So here's some statistics. The number of students with orthopedic impairments receiving special education services actually decreased from 2008 to 2014, and people with orthopedic impairments represent about 1% of all students classified in special education. So here's an illustration of that, and over here on the right you can see orthopedic impairments. They share a percentage with visual impairments, traumatic brain injury, and hearing impairments. So it's a very small demographic. We'll go over briefly on the categories of orthopedic impairment. So there are three. There is neurological, degenerative, and musculoskeletal diseases. We'll first start with neuromotor. So neuromotor, it's very interesting. Just keep in mind that neuromotor and neurological afflictions, they're in their own category, but if they cause any type of impairment to the musculoskeletal system, then it would be considered under orthopedic impairment. So an example is cerebral palsy, which is several non-progressive disorders of voluntary movement or posture that are caused by malfunction or damage to the developing brain that occurs before or during birth. So during birth, congenital, we have that defined. There are three classifications, so spasticity, stiff muscles, dyskinesia, uncontrollable movements, and ataxia, poor coordination and balance. So I'll briefly go over these. Here's some examples. So spasticity, the individual has little to no use in his right leg. This girl up here has poor coordination balance, hence the use of this walker to keep her her gait, try and keep her more linear when she ambulates. And dyskinesia, the fairly severe form of cerebral palsy, so this individual has uncontrollable movements of his limbs. So that's one reason why he has these mitts or pads over his hands, is so that he doesn't damage the hands or damages himself due to these uncontrollable movements. A developmental disease classified under orthopedic impairments would be something like spina bifida. So it's an abnormal developmental defect of the spinal column that may result in some paralysis in various parts of the body. So there are three types. Myelomeningocele is the most severe, and is defined as the sac of fluid that protrudes from an opening in the baby's back. So here's another term, baby, it's congenital. Part of the spinal cord and nerves are damaged. can cause loss of movement in legs and feet. Meningocele is a sac fluid that protrudes, but the spinal cord remains intact. So this one has minor disabilities, and spina bifida occulta is the least severe, having no disabilities. So here's just an illustration of that. Over here on the right, you can see myelomeningocele. You can see the nerves enter that opening and sort of take up space, take refuge in that protrusion. And over here, meningocele, the difference, you can see that the nerves are still intact and they can still function. And over here, spina bifida, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a gap right here, right where my cursor is. So considered to not have any disabilities associated with that. Here's just more illustrations, some x-rays of what it might look like. A degenerative disease that would be classified under orthopedic impairments would be muscular dystrophy. So it's an inherited disease that causes progressive weakness in muscle fibers, so atrophy of the muscles. Over here I just have some examples, some illustrations. The interesting thing about muscular dystrophy is that it's an inherited disease, so it would be classified as congenital just because if a parent is a carrier of that gene and it's passed on to the child may not see any symptoms for a while, but as the child ages, the muscular dystrophy will start to manifest and afflict the child or the individual. Gower's maneuver is a sign of muscular dystrophy, so if the child is on the floor and walks his hands in towards his feet and then walks his hands up to his knees and assumes like a lordosis type posture at the end. But we'll do a short quiz, so I'll kind of just breeze through it. If you need to pause the video to answer these questions, that's completely fine. But what percentage of students receiving special education qualify as having orthopedic impairments? The answer is 1%. Question 2. Orthopedic impairment is characterized by congenital anomalies that affect which two organ systems? So it's the muscular system and the skeletal system, or musculoskeletal system. Question 3. Gait of the child shown left is characterized by taking irregular steps as she struggles to keep her balance. She's diagnosed with cerebral palsy. Which category of cerebral palsy would she fall under? So if you want to pause the video and answer, it's fine. But just the keyword here is balance. So the answer would be ataxia or ataxic cerebral palsy. I'll go ahead and play this video for you so you can kind of see.
Thank you.
Whoops. But anyways, this child has muscular dystrophy. It doesn't help that the answer is right here in the title, but I really wanted to include this video just so you can see what the Gower's maneuver or Gower's sign looks like. But in order to stand completely, he's performing this movement, and the answer is Gower's maneuver or Gower's sign. Your doctor asked to diagnose the individual. The picture is an abnormal defect in the spinal column of an infant. The infant's legs are unable to function move. What specific diagnosis would you attribute to the infant? Some telltale sign here is the nerves in this sac, so it would be myelomeningocele spina bifida. So we defined some instances of orthopedic impairments, what types of diseases, disorders may cause orthopedic impairments. So we're going to go into working with those with orthopedic impairments. And I'll kind of breeze through these. I came across 2 studies. If you want to pause and read these, that's fine. But this first study went over some social activities and physical activities given to individuals with orthopedic impairments, and then asked them questions based on their feelings and their outlook on life. But this is just best illustrated in this graph right here. The green line represents individuals with the disability, and the, I guess, height of the line indicates their feelings of happiness, self-worth, and things like that. This blue line represents individuals with no disability. So even with physical activity or social activities, with or without them, individuals with no disability didn't really see any significant change, but the people with disabilities, orthopedic impairments specifically, they saw a drastic increase in their outlook on life and overall happiness. So this second study goes over like serious leisure, so which is the systematic pursuit of an amateur, hobbyist, or volunteer core activity that is highly substantial, interesting, and fulfilling. So in this study, they asked participants various questions after or during participation in these serious leisure activities. So they would ask, how do you spend your leisure time? Which leisure activities require more time and effort? And what are the benefits of pursuing a serious leisure activity? These are just some examples of the questions. And in conclusion, they revealed the type of leisure activities of people with orthopedic impairment and the benefits and constraints of implementing these types of activities. So here are some of the benefits: strengthen bonds, feelings of positivity, improved productivity, and some constraints would be like family support, psychological factors, maybe they might have some anxiety or self-esteem, and the level of impairment, that's always going to be a constraint. So here are some special considerations for participation when you're kind of tasked with working with these individuals. So the big ones here is differentiate between social and physical activities and create an inclusive environment. Those were the big ones that I saw. Varied activities help create an inclusive environment, but increased participation has shown that improvement on an individual's participation of life and overall happiness. So I think this one really spoke out to me, really caught my eye, just because we really don't want to exclude anyone, because if we do, that can seriously impact their overall happiness. And in my opinion, I think people should be happy. They should have that opportunity to be happy and fulfilled. So here's a gross motor classification system. If you want to read over these, that's fine, but I got these from cerebral palsy, but I feel like these can be used with people that have orthopedic impairments. So level 1 being no disability, and then level 5 being the most severe form of impairment. So we'll go over some examples of assistive devices. So they can be as rudimentary or simple, like the walking cane or some pencil grips. So I like the pencil grips just because it could mean the difference between someone writing and someone just sitting there. So ideally, we would want someone to write and draw and create and be artistic. Here's the activity discussion. You can go ahead and pause the video now and then read over this and post your opinion or whatever thoughts you may have in the discussion. Thanks for listening to the presentation, and see you in the discussion boards.